forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March.
Again, rebounded by Indiana. The game is over.
For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk,
Oh, he just shook the gravity.
and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Deace.
And greetings. Welcome to this week's episode of Bigger Ten. I'm Steve Deace, and yes, I'm still in the adjunct, waspless, yellow jacketless, B-list studio. Although I hear good things that we may be coming finally to the end. I hope that light at the end of the tunnel is not an oncoming train. But Aaron McIntire, my co-host here, you have not been attacked or accosted by any flying debris or apparatus so far today. So maybe these fumigation efforts are finally starting to work. Or am I jinxing it?
Yeah, I haven't seen anything today. Haven't been attacked today. I mean, yesterday was really the first time I had gotten attacked by one of these things. They always came after you, which
Indeed.
I'm thankful for in a perverse way. But actually, let me think that through a little bit more. No, I'm not thankful for that. But yeah, none today so far, which is a good thing.
Well, we had quite a week of Big Ten football. You ready to break it all down and look ahead to what could be an even bigger week? My understanding from Dave Revson over at the Big Ten Network that this is the first time since like 1992 that the Big Ten is going to play 3 top 10 opponents in a single week or something like that.
That's pretty crazy to think about.
That is pretty crazy to think about. So you ready to go?
You bet.
Let's get it going then with our Big Five here on Bigger Ten. And we have to begin with, unfortunately for our league, some bad news. The Ducks drowning the Bucks over the weekend. And, you know, we'll get into this a little bit later on, and we'll see if the audience on our Twitter polling agrees. But and I've seen some of this analysis out there in the national media. Well, Oregon is a team that has recruited darn near Ohio State's level, and they have. Actually, I had Oregon on my team total talent ratings, the 5th most talented roster in the country heading into this season. But we are still talking about a team that its starting quarterback is a journeyman cast-off from Boston College who lost his job there. And it was without its top 2 defensive players and lost who didn't play, including maybe a guy that might be the first non-quarterback picked in next spring's draft. And then another key player got hurt during the game and didn't play much of the second half. So I know that we all want to kind of think here, Aaron, well, you know, they've got a unique blend of athleticism there. They were able to stand up to Ohio State. Here's what has me concerned from a Buckeye perspective is we've played 2 games this season, Aaron, and in both games, dramatically different types of offenses and talent levels between Minnesota and Oregon. And yet we have seen a common theme. The Ohio State front cannot stand up at the point of attack. And while last year this was not a great Buckeye defense, they had the worst scoring defense in school history, but really all their problems were largely relegated to the secondary or the fact that they played a base defense, and so they'd get caught with a linebacker on a fast slot receiver. But really, we don't have a lot of really explosive offenses in our league that could take advantage of that, at least not to the point that it countermands the damage Ohio State inflicts on you with that offense, right? But if now the problem is they can't stand up to the point of attack so that you can own the line of scrimmage, you can limit the amount of possessions, that Ohio State can put up 600 yards and 31 first downs, and instead of scoring 55 on you, they score 28 or 35. You know, I don't think there's a lot of teams in our league, Aaron, that could put up 42, 45 on Ohio State. I do think there's a few teams in our league that could put up 28 or 35, though, particularly if the way to do it is controlling the point of attack. So I kind of think maybe we've seen on film a couple of things now that maybe suggest that Ohio State's distance between them and the rest of the Big Ten is not as vast as we thought heading into this season. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and you know, the first instance of this on film was a Minnesota team who barely escaped with a win over Miami of Ohio, and so that's kind of a little bit of a yo there as well. So Part of me thinks this is systemic. Something's going very wrong on that side of the ball in Columbus. But the other part of me is it's Ohio State. You know what? They may take their lumps early, but eventually they'll come around. But as of right now, yes, I would be concerned if I were an Ohio State fan. It seems to me Ohio State's strategy, or at least what it's been good at most of the time when it's been playing at the upper echelon and playing competition in the upper echelon, is that, yes, they've had some good defenses. They've had some great defenses over the years. But overall, basically, our defense can get just enough stops to where our offense is going to score on a vast majority of their possessions, whether it's a field goal or a touchdown. Right now, though, so our defense really only needs to get 2 or 3 stops, big stops in a game in order for us to feel pretty good about our chances. Again, that's against the upper echelon. I don't think you can say that right now about this Ohio State team. So if I'm Penn State, heck, if I'm Indiana now, if I'm Michigan now, especially with what we saw about of Michigan, we'll talk about in just a little bit, I'm thinking, you know what? It's now or never. It might just be now or never to take the Big Ten East. So yeah, I would be concerned if I'm an Ohio State fan. Yes, you recruit at a high clip, as you always should, and so eventually that talent is the Jimmies and Joes versus the X's and O's. But as of right now, something is just not clicking on that side of the ball.
Well, let's go to a team that's near and dear to your heart for number 2 on our Big 5 here this week on Bigger 10. And that is the Hawkeyes hammering the Cyclones again. And yet again, this has been really the recipe for Iowa in the Matt Campbell era. Iowa, I think now this is 6 years in a row, Iowa has either not turned it over or won the turnover battle against Iowa State. So Iowa State had nearly twice as many first downs, nearly twice as many yards. Now, again, a lot of that was in garbage time, but they were still averaging higher yards per play against Iowa before we even got into garbage time. But it just didn't matter. We saw Iowa wreak havoc again with turnovers, similar to what we saw against Indiana. And, turnovers from an analytic perspective and a handicapping perspective are really random. If they weren't random, Bud Elliott said this on CBS Sports recently, who's a big sports handicapper. And he's like, if turnovers weren't random, Alabama would or Clemson would lead the nation in turnover margin every year, and they don't. And he's right about that. It's very random. And for just about any other team that was 2-0, beating 2 ranked teams fairly convincingly, averaging something like 176 yards of offense, being like 97th in the nation in yards per play, I would say you cannot continue that. That's just start fading that immediately. Even though playing Kent State this weekend, the line's going to be inflated because of Iowa's top 5 ranking. So fade that Kent State right now. There's no way you can continue to do that with this kind of offense. But with the exception of like 2 years. 2002 when Brad Banks nearly won the Heisman, 2005 when Drew Tate was a revelation. A lot of the best seasons Iowa's had in the Kirk Ferentz era, they kind of look like this. I think Iowa was like 89th or 90th in total offense in 2015 when they went 12-0. The team that started, 8-0, 9-0 in 2009 looked a lot like this.
Yep.
This is actually most of the best years under Kirk Ferentz. It kind of looks like this. So I don't know that I'm so quick to say Iowa's not going to have like a plus 18 turnover margin at the end of the year, because I've seen them do things like this. Now, I do wonder about getting 37 points off turnovers in 2 games, Aaron, when a lot of teams would like to do that for a season. Okay. I wonder about that. But I mean, you watch Iowa football more closely than I do. This really doesn't look much different than a lot of their biggest wins. Most of their biggest wins over the years under Kirk Ferentz have looked.
No, I agree. This is Adam Sandler in Uncut Gems. This is how I win. That's basically Iowa football. It does catch up with them eventually. I remember you mentioned 2009. 2009, it was Northwestern. Now, of course, their quarterback got knocked out that game. Then Iowa came back the very next week, looked like a completely different team with a backup quarterback, and nearly beat Ohio State in the shoe. So eventually the offense catches up to some degree. What degree that'll be with this team, I don't know. I mean, the BTN bus tour said this has the most skill position talent that he's seen from an Iowa team maybe ever since they started doing the tour. So I think this is a good time to have a couple of teams with not super great defenses, unlike what we've seen the last couple of weeks, because I do believe Indiana and Iowa State have very, very good defenses. That's not an excuse. I mean, it's still putrid offensively. Very, very bad, with the exception of maybe one drive against Iowa State and one drive against Indiana. But overall, yeah, this is how Iowa wins those games. I think a big question mark, too, for Iowa, not a whole lot of depth, really, anywhere. That's pretty typical for an Iowa team, but this year, even more so. So, again, these next 2 weeks, actually, I think are going to be a pretty big indication of how the rest of the season is going to go. Even more than these first two games. Most Iowa fans were going to be content with a 1-1 mark, no matter who that was against.
Right.
But the way that it's set up, this is a pretty good deal for Iowa, and so we'll see where it goes. But yeah, that offense has to catch up eventually for them to be able to consider winning the Big Ten this year, which I think is their main goal. But if that can happen to some degree, again, if they can establish an identity on offense, which we're going to be talking about identities here in just a little bit, I think Iowa has a pretty promising season set up for them.
To me, I think you mentioned there's two major trend lines about wondering what this means for Iowa going forward. You mentioned one, the depth. On my team total talent ratings, and I've been doing this since 2017, so this is the 5th season I've been doing it. This is easily the least talented overall Iowa team, meaning that the depth numbers just are not there. So you do wonder about injuries over the course, particularly given how physical of a game Iowa likes to play. You do wonder about that over the course of a long grind of a season, obviously. But the other is, and this is what I'm thinking of, I'm a Hawkeye fan. Hey, man, I mean, Tyler Goodson has had like one good run in both of these games and then done nothing else. At the end of the year, he's going to have 1,200 yards. You know that. So you got to think, if I'm an Iowa fan on the positive side, if we can avoid injuries, at some point we are going to get this running game going with a back this good and that good of an offensive line. And we won 2 games against ranked teams without that. So that's where there's both a negative omen, but then a positive omen there too, if I'm an Iowa fan gazing forward.
It will be hopefully a good offensive line. Right now it's not that, at least from what I've seen. I've had a little bit of an injury issue there, but Linderbaum seems to be anchoring that entire group. So once that comes together, I think a lot of other things will come together as well. And I think it'll be, again, this is a great time to have a couple of hopefully tune-up games for your offense.
All right, let's go to point 3, and you've teased it a couple times now. I won't delve too much with my own thoughts into this because I just did a bunch of this yesterday on Michigan podcast. But in general, is it time to recognize Michigan? And again, if you want more of my specific analysis, and man, do those all blues just pop in that photo. But if you want my specific analysis, you can get that right here on the channel from Michigan Podcast. But in short, several of the boxes that Michigan fans were wanting to see checked this season, a more enthusiastic, a more team-focused culture, finding finally some form of an identity on offense after the last few years, really since 2016, kind of wandering in the wilderness here. Last year with the defense, and was that an outlier? What about this new defensive coordinator from the Ravens who's never coordinated a defense before? I think a lot of those boxes Michigan has checked. I'm prepared to say that the floor is higher than I thought. I don't know if the ceiling's higher than I thought. But I really thought 5-7 and 6-6, Aaron, would be on the table if all went wrong this year. With the way that they are playing up front in these first 2 games, I kind of feel like 7-5, 8-4 that I thought was the ceiling might now actually be the floor. But what are your thoughts? And take all the time you want. I've already given Michigan plenty of run here on the channel this week.
Yeah, I think so far this has to be a much better start to the season, or at least a much more promising start to the season than what anybody inside or outside of Michigan fandom was expecting from the Wolverines. And I think it comes down to one thing so far. To answer the overall question, do they deserve props? I think a little bit so far. I mean, I don't think any Michigan fans really, any serious Michigan fans or honest, I should say, Michigan fans are really putting the cart ahead of the horse now and saying we're going to win the big. No, I don't really see that yet. But it's a promising start for Michigan. And I think it comes down to one thing. Identity. They established an identity on Saturday night, at least to some degree. And that identity is we are going to run the football. Okay, Washington lost to an FCS team. That is bad, yeah. But as we heard all day leading up to this on College Game Day, and it's true, Washington also has a very, very good defense as well. And to be able to run up and down the field on them, putting up over 340 yards on the ground against any defense, much less somebody like Washington, that's a pretty good indication. The decision was early on, I think as you've discussed on Michigan podcast, basically handcuffing Cade McNamara and just living or dying by the run. How this is different from Michigan's teams I've seen in years past, which I do follow Michigan because I'm your producer for Michigan podcast as well, is that if something doesn't work, if their original game plan doesn't work, or if the script falls flat, or if you're done with the script, you just start trying poop.
Yeah.
No, this was committed from the get-go.
Yeah.
And so that's a really positive sign. Now, you are going to have to develop a passing game.
Yep.
But if your running game is something that you can hang your hat on, if that's your bread and butter, and then you play defense like you did the other night, that's pretty promising. That's pretty promising for Michigan.
So over the last 5 seasons, Washington has averaged giving up only 131 yards rushing per game. Michigan ran the ball 56 times for over 6 yards a clip against what is going to be one of the best defenses it will see all season long. So if you can do that against them, then there's a lot of teams on this schedule you can do that against and win. Now, you're not going to be able to do that in Madison, Wisconsin. You might not even be able to do it in East Lansing in a rivalry game. You know you're going to need more than that when you go to State College, and you sure as hell know you're going to need a lot more than that when you host Ohio State. But let's face it, we were looking at games like Northwestern and at Nebraska heading into the year as, I don't know. Well, if you have that offensive identity, you can beat those teams with that. Let's get to a quintet. And we mentioned 3 top 10 opponents on the docket for the Big Ten this week. 5 games against ranked teams. I mean, the Big Ten had center stage last week with the national game in every window. Center stage again this week. Cincinnati going for its highest ranking ever. It's now the highest rated team from the state of Ohio. They go to Indiana. Auburn, and so that's the big noon game. The night game is the whiteout. Auburn traveling to Penn State. You have Purdue going to Notre Dame in a renewal of an old rivalry. I think Purdue has more wins over a ranked Notre Dame team than anybody other than USC in the history of Notre Dame football. And we've seen the Irish 2 weeks in a row here barely escape against Florida State and Toledo. Nebraska and Oklahoma renewing one of the all-time classic rivalries and the 50th anniversary of their Titanic 1-2 game of the century in 1971, the Johnny Rodgers game. And then Michigan State, who a lot of people are like, wow, I mean, I know they haven't played anybody, but they just look better against Northwestern. And then Youngstown State heading down to a Miami team that got absolutely embarrassed by Alabama and then had to hold on for dear life to pull it out against Appalachian State last week. So when you look at that quintet of games, what stands out to you, though, there, Aaron?
Man, maybe it's just because of the larger number, but I'm looking forward to this weekend. I think even more than last weekend, even with the Iowa State game, mostly because Iowa doesn't play a top 20 team this weekend. But
don't you love weekends like this when your team's got an easy one and so you can watch it with no stress and then enjoy all the other games that are all stressed out? Yes, I love that.
It's a good time.
Yeah.
It's a good time. So I would say, in order of the games I'm most interested in, Penn State and Auburn. Then it's kind of a coin flick, but I'll give it to Indiana and Cincinnati. I'm actually really the coin flip on this one is Michigan State and Miami. That actually could be a pretty interesting game. And then after that, what else do we have? Wisconsin and Notre Dame. That's 4th on my list. That should be a pretty good game as well. We're going to see if Wisconsin is for real this year. And we're going to see if Notre Dame actually is for real this year as well. And then spacebar, whatever the planned murder that is, Oklahoma versus Nebraska. I mean, negative integers. I'm sorry, Cornhusker fans. It's a rake your lawn Saturday for you. So I'm sorry in advance for that, but that's going to be a murder on national television.
Well, let's get to our updated, or at least I just posted on our Twitter account, updated power ratings for the Big Ten. And this is a combination of both where I think teams are at right now with an acknowledgement of what I think their ceilings are. So, I mean, to me, Iowa has the two best wins that any team in the country has this early in the year. So I have them number one. There you can see the rest of the list. Ohio State. Penn State's resume right now is more impressive, but I still think in the long run, Ohio State's the better team. I've got Wisconsin and Michigan. I think I think the first three are debatable. I think the next two you could debate if they're interchangeable. And then after that, I really think we're kind of, straining a gnat here to figure out a difference between Team 6 in Maryland and Team 11 Minnesota. And then I think, again, Illinois, Nebraska, and Northwestern are their own tier. Your thoughts on how I've power rated the Big Ten in football after the first 2 weeks, Aaron?
I think that's a fairly fair assessment of where everyone is. I mean, Illinois, looking there towards the bottom, Illinois just got their behinds handed to them at the hands of Virginia, and so what looked like a promising start for them. I mean, they look like they're in a real rebuild, so maybe coming back down, the expectations coming back down to earth a little bit. Indiana, it's kind of surprising to see them so far down, but when you play nobody and then you lose on the road to Iowa the way that they did, it kind of makes sense where they are. Looking on up the list, I might put Michigan above Wisconsin. That's a hard. I think right now there's actually kind of a coin flip, and then the top three. Yeah, Iowa for now. For now, based through 2 weeks, as you said, they have the best resume of anybody in the country, actually, and so they deserve to be atop the list right now. But I think any one of Ohio State, Penn State, or Wisconsin could overtake them in the long course of things.
Well, folks, let me you like data and numbers. Check this out. BetQL's best bets algorithm. This can be sides, totals, player props. Their best bets algorithm went 13-2. Is that good? That's incredible. 13-2 on its 5-star bets for Week 1 NFL games, Thursday from Sunday. So you do not want to miss out on a chance to beat your sportsbook by using all that BetQL has to offer. 13-2 is an incredible mark. And that's why you want to get an advantage over your sportsbook with BetQL. It's the only app you're going to download and use and need to make smart bets. Their computer model scans over 350,000 unique bets per year in order to give you a best bet recommendation for every game across all major sports, everything from spreads, sides, totals, player props, etc. They also give you the sharp data so that you know how the people that do this for a living, where are they putting their money. They give you all the updates on that, as well as line movements, injury, team news, everything you're looking for. You're all going to find it at BetQL. So head to the App Store or Google Play Store now to download BetQL. You can head also to try.betql.co/10 if you want to do it online. That's try.betql.co/10 and enter the discount code 10 at payment checkout for 25% off any of their subscription offerings. Again, promo code is 10 at payment checkout for 25% off any of the subscription offerings at BetQL. Do not miss a chance to bet and beat your sportsbook this football season. We'll come back, play our weekly game of Would You Rather here on Bigger 10 next. All right, back here with our weekly game of Would You Rather here on Bigger 10. Aaron, would you rather be Purdue or Nebraska on the road against a top 10 team that's become kind of a playoff regular now? Which of those teams would you rather be this week?
Oh, goodness. I think I'd rather be Purdue. I think both of them. I mean, I think I'd rather be Purdue at this point. Nebraska, I just have no confidence in whatsoever. It's not just Iowa fan in me. It's just...
Plenty of Nebraska fans don't have any confidence either.
I just can't imagine going in week after week after week, just pounding your head against the pavement and expecting something. That's basically, it's painful. That's what I'm trying to describe. It's painful watching Nebraska's collapse, even from an Iowa fan perspective. It's painful. It's almost embarrassing. So I'd rather be Purdue. This one is for you. Would you rather be Ohio State or Iowa State right now, coming off crushing losses at home?
As weird as it sounds, I think I might rather be Iowa State. I'm going to UNLV. I get away from my home fans, and I kind of get a chance to go on the road against a team I know I'm going to punk, and kind of get back together and rejoin together as a team. I mean, it's a disaster in Columbus this week. I mean, there's talks about firing Kerry Coombs, the defensive coordinator. Can they elevate somebody from within? And one of the names being talked about, by the way, is former Iowa State football coach Paul Rhodes. I really think there is a ton more pressure, both from their fans and the media, on Ohio State right now than Iowa State. And we've also seen Iowa State have a history of losing this game and still going on and having very good seasons. I mean, how we just saw it last year, and Ohio State, by the way, has done that. They lost in week 2 in 2017 to Oklahoma. That team went to the playoff. They lost in week 2 in 2014 to Virginia Tech. That team won the first playoff. So you kind of think maybe their fans and their media would be a little bit like, Aaron Rodgers, relax here, but it's been anything but. So I think I'd rather be Iowa State right now, because I'm fighting a two-front war here from a Buckeye perspective. I'm going up against my own fans and media, and then trying to figure out what's going on within my own program too.
Interesting.
For you, Aaron, would you rather be holding a Michigan over 7.5 or an Iowa over 8.5 season win total ticket right now? Which of these two are you more confident cashing at the end of the year?
Well, I'm going to say Iowa over 8.5, because who has two thumbs and an Iowa over 8.5 ticket? I threw $15 on it at the beginning of the year because everybody and their mother's dog was pounding the under on Iowa 8.5, and I'm like, I'm going to beat myself up if I'm not just the pure contrarian play here. So I have the Iowa over 8.5. It's really not that hard. So assume they win the next two. That's 4. You need 5 more there. You're in the same division as Illinois, Nebraska, and Northwestern, and Minnesota as well. So that's probably 4 games that you're going to be fairly heavy favorites in. You just got to get one more somewhere along the way as well. And Maryland, whether that's Maryland, Penn State, or Wisconsin, I think they can get that done. So I'd rather be Iowa over 8.5 right now, only because I hold it. If I didn't hold an Iowa over 8.5 ticket, definitely Michigan over 7.5.
Okay.
Next up, would you rather play Illinois plus 7.5 this week or Minnesota plus 2.5?
I kind of like both of these, actually, but I guess I'd rather play the Illinois because of the mercurial nature of Maryland. Remember, they had that great start a couple of years ago.
Yep.
And then they went on the road and lost to Temple, and their whole season just spiraled from there, right?
Oh, yeah, and then they got off to like a 4-0 start, what was it, 2 or 3 years ago? They had Penn State at home for the renewal of the big rivalry, and they just got housed in their own place.
Yeah. So I guess I'd rather be holding a ticket going against Mike Loxley's worst record in the history of college football if I had to choose one of the two. Hey, folks, it's been a great start to the NFL season, and it's only getting better over at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the NFL. And DraftKings is kicking off another week of action by giving all new customers a can't-miss offer. Bet just $1 on any football game this week and receive $150 in free bets instantly, no matter what, from DraftKings. And this football season, all customers can swing big with DraftKings same-game parlays that allow you to combine multiple bets for a bigger payout. This week, place a same-game parlay on any NFL game, and you'll be credited up to $25 even if you lose. All right, so download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use your promo code BIGGER10 to receive $150 in free bets instantly when you place a $1 bet on any football game at DraftKings. That's promo code BIGGER10 to get $150 in free bets instantly this week at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the NFL. Now, if you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services Gambling Disorder Helpline at 800-270-7117. 21 and older, Michigan only. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for full terms and conditions. All right, this week's Twitter poll results, we asked you, it's what Aaron and I were discussing earlier, did Oregon expose that Ohio State is vulnerable, or was it just an outlier given the Ducks' athleticism and speed? 70% of you agree with me that it exposed something in Ohio State. 30% saying it's an outlier. You agree, disagree with those results, Aaron? You think maybe they're a little too one-sided?
I think as it stands right now, yes, they were exposed. And looking back at the first game against Minnesota, they were exposed then as well. So I think this is probably a good split right here. I'm guessing the 30% are either fall into the camp of what I pointed out earlier, they're going to be okay eventually, this is just a blip, or they're just diehard Ohio State Buckeyes fans who don't know how to deal with losses this early in the season. I think the split is pretty predictable there.
All right, that brings us to our feedback of the week here on Bigger Ten. And that feedback comes from Austin Hauser, who says, until a Big Ten team beats Ohio State, they are number one in the power ratings. No one else in the conference has Oregon speed. They are a top 10 roster, and I believe ninth according to the team talent composite from 24/7 Sports. No other Big Ten team is in the top 10 outside of Ohio State. Oregon, I believe, would beat both Iowa and Penn State. I don't think that's an unreasonable take. I can see why someone would believe that.
No, I mean, I will say this particular take, strikes me as maybe Ohio State fan, a little bit sensitive after that loss. Don't mean that to be condescending or anything. Having said that, though, I actually agree with that to some degree. Just take off everything that's happened so far this season. Just Ohio State. Ohio State deserves that benefit of the doubt any season based on the fact that they've won how many years in the row this conference. So I think that's reasonable. Being Ohio State is the big cat for now in the Big Ten.
Folks, once again, thank you to our sponsor, BetQL. It's the only app you're going to need to beat your sportsbook. Find their information along with a 25% off discount code in the description of this video. And also, check out the special BetMGM offer in the description in order to receive a free year of BetQL and other sportsbook sign-up offers and bonuses. Because BetQL is the #1 app to compare betting odds and is a must-get if you want to beat your sportsbook this football season. Please remember to like, rate, subscribe, 5-star review, share, follow, however the case may be, whichever platform you use, whether that's iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or right here on YouTube. Please keep doing that so we can find more fans of Big Ten sports just like you. For Aaron McIntire, I'm Steve Deace, reminding you to follow us on Twitter at Bigger10 to keep up to date on what we think in between episodes of Bigger 10 right here. Until the next time, have a great week. Enjoy a phenomenal weekend of action. We'll be with you next time right here on Bigger 10.